Hello, my name is Emma. A few months ago, I became a multimillionaire. I won the lottery $20 million. Even now, I still have moments where I stare out my kitchen window and wonder if it really happened. That night, I sat at the old oak table in my Asheville cabin. The same table I've had since the kids were little. Staring at the numbers on the ticket in my hand. 11, 11, 23, 41, 46, and the Powerball 19. I must have read them 10 times. I turned on the television, double-checked the lottery website, refreshed it 3 more times, then sat down and cried. Not because of the money, but because I knew exactly what I wanted to do with it. My 66th birthday was coming up in just 1 week. I thought, what better time to share this incredible gift than with the 2 people I love most, my son Brandon and my daughter Megan. They were both grown now, Brandon working construction projects out in Austin, and Megan working in finance in Seattle. We didn't see each other often, but I had raised them to be hardworking, kind, and determined. Even after my messy divorce from their father David, I did everything I could to give them the best. And now, it was time to give them everything I'd never had. I made a plan. I'd surprise them both during my birthday dinner. I found 2 beautiful homes. One in Austin and one in Seattle. Spacious, well located, with enough charm to feel like more than real estate. These weren't just investments, they were symbols of safety, of home. I put down the deposits, signed the paperwork, and had the contracts neatly folded, sitting in 2 envelopes next to personal checks, each written out for $1 million. My lawyer helped me structure the gifts, but I wanted to hand them over personally. I wanted to see their faces. I wanted to see joy. Maybe even some tears. I didn't tell anyone. Not a soul. Not even my best friend Nancy, who I walk with every Saturday morning. I kept the secret locked in my heart, just counting the days until that moment at the table where I'd slide those envelopes across the table and say, I believe in you. Here's your future. I spent 2 full days prepping the house, cleaned every room, bought new candles, hung fairy lights on the back porch. I cooked all their favorite dishes, smoked brisket sliders for Brandon, lemon herb salmon for Megan, and roasted root vegetables with rosemary and sea salt, something we used to eat every Sunday night when they were teenagers. I even baked an apple crumble from scratch, with extra cinnamon just like Brandon liked. I wore the sky blue sweater Megan had given me for Christmas 3 years ago and set the table for me, my kids, and my granddaughter Lily, who usually came along with Megan when she visited. The sun started to dip behind the mountains. The sky turned cotton candy pink. I lit the candles, took a breath, and waited. At 3:47 p.m., Megan called. Mom, I'm so sorry, she said, her voice already sounding like she was distracted. Something came up at work. I'm stuck in back-to-back meetings, and I don't know when I'll get out. I'll try to call later. Okay. I smiled even though my heart sank a little. Of course. Sweetheart, work comes first. A few minutes later, Brandon sent a text. Emergency at the site. Can't leave. Might be a late night. Sorry. Mom. I put my phone down slowly and whispered, It's okay. Because it always was. I had learned how to be okay for decades. I had taught myself how to breathe through disappointment. By 7:00 p.m., I had warmed the food twice. By 8:00, I blew out the candles, their wax pooling into soft circles. I didn't want them to burn down too far. By 9:00, I sent a message in our family group chat, "Dinner's ready. Hope you're on the way, Itija." The message sat there, unread. By 10:30, I knew they weren't coming. I tried calling. Megan didn't answer. Brandon's phone went straight to voicemail. I thought about leaving them a message. But what would I say? "Hey, I made you dinner and wanted to give you a life-changing gift. But no worries, get some rest." I sat back down at the table and looked at the food. Everything was still warm thanks to the oven. The effort and my stubborn hope. The envelopes were still on the table, right next to the birthday card I had written to myself, because sometimes, when no one else remembers, you learn to celebrate yourself. I eventually put the food away, dish by dish, wrapped the brisket, sealed the salmon, placed the apple crumble in the fridge with a sticky note that read, "For tomorrow." Maybe. The envelopes, I didn't have the heart to throw them out. So I took them to my bedroom and placed them in the drawer of my nightstand, right next to an old photograph of Brandon and Megan when they were just 5 years old, both grinning with their front teeth missing, arms wrapped around my neck. By the time I got into bed, it was nearly 1:00 a.m. My birthday was over. No cake. No hugs. No phone calls past those short apologies. No happy birthday, Mom. I laid there staring at the ceiling in the dark and whispered the words I hadn't said in years. "You did everything right, Emma. And somehow, you're still alone." And for the first time in a long time, I felt something inside me begin to crack, not from sadness, but from something sharper, something colder. Disbelief. Because how could they forget me like this? The morning after my birthday, the house was too quiet. Even the birds outside the window didn't seem to sing with their usual cheer. I poured myself a cup of black coffee, still wearing my cardigan from last night. The sleeves smelled faintly of cinnamon and roasted vegetables. I stared at my phone. No missed calls. No messages. Just the unread group chat from last night, my invitation to dinner still sitting there like a ghost. I tried to tell myself it was fine. Maybe they forgot. Maybe they were busy. Maybe today would be different. So I typed, "It's Saturday. Come by tonight if you're free. I have something important to share." I hit send and waited. Nothing. Needing air. I threw on a coat and stepped outside. The mountain breeze was crisp. As I turned onto the walking trail, I saw Nancy, my neighbor and longtime friend, walking her golden retriever. "Scout." She waved cheerfully. "You're usually out here before the sun. What took you so long?" I gave her a half-hearted smile. "Late night." Nancy tilted her head. "Let me guess, you cooked up a storm for Brandon and Megan." "Huh, let me guess again. They didn't show." Her words, though wrapped in jest. "Stung." I looked down at my boots and didn't answer. She chuckled, a little too knowingly. "Emma, I've told you 100 times, just book a reservation. Let a restaurant handle it. But no, you had to cook Brandon's favorite barbecue sliders and Megan's lemon salmon. And probably a whole separate kid-friendly meal for Lily, too." I winced. Nancy shrugged. "You go through all that effort. And for what? They're grown. They've got their own lives. You've done your part." Before I could respond, and said, another voice cut through the air like a rusted blade. Well, if it isn't Saint Emma." I froze. I knew that voice. It belonged to Linda Hayes, a former coworker from the textile export firm I worked at for over a decade. A woman who once competed with me for a senior role I eventually earned and never forgave me for it. She stood at the bottom of her porch stairs, arms crossed, a twisted smirk tugging at her lips. "You always loved acting like the perfect mom. bragging about Brandon this. Megan, that funny. Didn't see either of them yesterday. But I saw plenty of someone else. I started to walk past her. But she stepped forward and shoved her phone toward me. Go on. Take a look. You deserve the truth. I didn't want to. Every part of me screamed, don't look. But my hand reached out anyway. The screen lit up. A video. A fancy restaurant in downtown Asheville. String lights hanging from the ceiling. A cake on a table that read, Happy 25th Anniversary, David and Catherine. Happy birthday, Catherine. I stopped breathing. There they were. My ex-husband David and his longtime affair partner Catherine, now apparently his wife. They looked happy. Comfortable. Like a family. And standing beside them, Brandon. Megan. Lily. Lily was holding Catherine's hand. She looked up at her and chirped. Grandma Cat. You're the prettiest grandma in the world. I want you to come to my school's talent show next week, Catherine beamed. Of course. Sweetheart. And then, Megan leaned in, kissed Catherine on the cheek, and said, Happy birthday. Mom. Mom. I handed the phone back to Linda. My fingers ice cold. But she wasn't done. Oh. And just wait, Brandon gave Catherine a gold bracelet. His wife was bragging about it in the restroom. Said it cost over $5. Ling. And he gifted David a crate of aged whiskey. Fancy stuff. Linda clicked her tongue. Meanwhile, when he visits you, if he ever does, it's what? A bag of takeout. Maybe I didn't respond. I couldn't. My mouth felt like it was filled with cotton. My stomach twisted. She kept going. And Megan bought Catherine a full jewelry set. Necklace. Earrings. The works. And kept calling her mom like it was nothing. But you dear? Sweet. Forgotten, Emma. What did you get? Nancy stepped between us. Trying to intervene. That's enough. Linda. But Linda yanked her arm away and hissed. She needs to hear this. Needs to stop living in that fantasy world where she thinks her kids still care. Her words landed like bullets. I walked away without another word. Hands trembling. Chest tight. I don't remember how I got back home. The wind howled through the trees. But all I could hear was Lily's voice saying, Grandma Cat. That night, I sat in the living room, the untouched envelope still in the drawer next to me. My reflection in the window looked older than I remembered. Not from time, but from the truth. A truth I couldn't unsee. They had chosen her. Not me. Not the woman who carried them. Raised them. Fought for them. And suddenly, that surprise I had so carefully prepared, it didn't feel like love anymore. It felt like a reward they didn't deserve. That night, sleep didn't come easy. I tossed. I turned. I stared up at the shadows on my bedroom ceiling, trying to quiet the storm building in my chest. But no matter how tightly I wrapped the blankets around me, no matter how many times I told myself, You're okay, Emma, I wasn't. I felt like I was drowning in a kind of grief that didn't have a name. It wasn't death. It wasn't heartbreak. It was something heavier. It was erasure. And somewhere between midnight and morning, the past began to rise, like water pressing against old floodgates that could no longer hold. I saw it all so clearly. David and I met when I was 24. He worked for the state's Office of Statistics, confident, composed, with a steady paycheck and a well-pressed suit. My parents adored him. A good man. My father said, The kind you marry. Back then, I was just a part-time proofreader at a publishing company. My dreams were quiet. Maybe open a bookstore. Maybe write a children's book someday. But those dreams were shelved the moment I married David. I didn't ask enough questions. I didn't think to wonder why he was still single at 30. I didn't know about Catherine. Not then. We married within a year. It was never passionate, but it was stable, predictable. I convinced myself that was enough. 3 years later, I gave birth to twins Brandon and Megan. It should have been the happiest time of my life. But I was exhausted. 2 babies. Colicky and needy. No sleep. No family help. No David. Really. He worked late. Came home tired. Always had meetings. I asked if his mother could come help me. He said she was busy. Said his father was sick. Said it wasn't a good time. Weeks turned into months. I started to feel invisible. I lost my job when I couldn't return from maternity leave. And on Brandon and Megan's first birthday, David's mother didn't show up. Not even a phone call. That night, when I asked David why, he finally told me she had a bad fall. Hurt her back. She's been recovering and didn't want to worry us. I felt terrible for judging her. But a week later, his aunt stopped by to visit. A kind woman. Always smiling. Always too honest. I pulled her aside and asked, "Is it true about his mother's injury?" Her smile faltered. She hesitated. Then she said it, "Emma, she's not injured. She's working." "Working?" I asked. She nodded. David arranged for her to be a full-time nanny. For his boss's wife, Catherine. The same Catherine he was seeing before he met you. I felt something inside me collapse. You're saying, while I was begging for help raising my own children, his mother was helping someone else raise theirs, yes. For Catherine, she said quietly, they've always been close. That night, I couldn't breathe. My hands shook as I cleaned the bottles. My mind spinning. Catherine. A name that hadn't come up in years. I remembered hearing it once. In a college story David told, but he had said it was nothing. Turns out, it was everything. The next day, after David left for work, I went into his home office. I never snooped, but something told me I had to look. In the bottom drawer of his desk, beneath tax returns and old notebooks, I found it a stack of old letters tied with twine. The return address Raleigh. Catherine Hale. I read the first one, then the second, then the 15th. They spanned years, some before our marriage, some during, some even post-wedding. She wrote about missing him, about her unhappy marriage, about their daughter, about the night she cried herself to sleep after he married me. And worst of all, she wrote, "Thank you for sending your mom. I don't know what I'd do without her. Every time she helps with my little girl, I feel like I'm still a part of you." That line hit me like a hammer. I had just given birth to twins. I was bleeding, nursing, sleep-deprived, and desperate. And he was supporting another woman emotionally. Financially, while I was screaming for help in silence, I confronted him that night. He didn't deny it. He didn't apologize. He just looked at me and said, "They're just letters. Nothing happened. You're overreacting." And then, as if on cue, one of the twins started crying. David walked away, shut himself in his office. I stood in the kitchen, holding an empty can of formula I had begged him to replace for 3 days. There was nothing left. No backup. No milk. No help. Something inside me snapped. I remember storming into his office and grabbing one of Catherine's photos from his desk. He lunged to stop me, but I tore it into pieces. He shouted. Pushed me. Hard. My back slammed into the corner of the bookshelf. And for a moment, everything went white. I could hear both babies crying. I could feel the tears in my eyes. But more than anything, I could feel something change. That night, I made a promise one day. I will leave this man, and I will raise these kids on my own, even if it kills me. I didn't leave right away. Life never makes it that clean. But from that moment on, I stopped loving him. And the woman who used to whisper "I'll be fine" into her pillow, she was starting to wake up. It's strange. The moment you finally realize you've been living someone else's life, it wasn't a big, dramatic event. No slamming doors. No screaming matches. Just silence. A kind of silence that settles into your bones and whispers, "You don't have to live like this anymore." After the truth about David and Catherine, I didn't leave immediately. I stayed. For the kids? For stability? For fear. I told myself they needed both parents. Even if one was absent in every way but physical. But something in me had shifted. I stopped waiting for David to come home. I stopped cooking for him. I stopped hoping he'd ask how I was doing. I became invisible in my own marriage. And somehow, it made me see myself more clearly. I took on freelance work at night. I edited research papers, resumes, anything I could get my hands on. Every dollar I saved felt like a brick in the foundation of the life I was quietly building for myself. And slowly, my confidence returned. The children were young, but even they started to sense something. Megan would crawl into bed with me some nights and whisper, "Mommy, are you sad?" I'd smile and tell her no. But my eyes told the truth. Then, one afternoon 5 years after I discovered the letters, David came home early. Unannounced. That, alone, was suspicious. He never left work before 7 p.m. RLS/RN/M. He walked in, tossed his keys on the counter, and casually said, "I think we should separate." I looked up from the bills I was sorting. "Separate," I repeated. He nodded like it was nothing more than deciding on takeout or leftovers. It's been a long time coming. We both know this isn't working. And there it was. The truth. Spoken not with regret or sorrow, but convenience. I took a breath. And instead of crying like the old Emma would have, I asked, "Are you in love with her?" He blinked. Then said, "I never stopped." The quiet that followed was deafening. But inside me, something powerful stirred. Not pain. Not anger. Relief. The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork. Custody discussions. Financial negotiations. David wanted shared custody mostly for appearances. He moved in with Catherine immediately. And for the first time in years, I was alone. Terrified. Yes. But also free. I moved into a small duplex near downtown Asheville. It had creaky floorboards and a broken porch light. But it was mine. I painted the walls sage green, bought second-hand furniture, and every time I hung a picture or lit a candle, it felt like reclaiming a part of myself I thought was gone forever. The twins adjusted slowly. Brandon acted out at school. Megan cried a lot at bedtime. But I didn't hide the truth from them, not the ugly parts. And not the parts where I was learning to stand tall again. One evening, while folding laundry, I found a note tucked into Megan's homework folder. It was written in crayon. It said, "Dear Mommy, I know Daddy made you cry. I think you're the bravest woman in the world." I held that note to my chest and sobbed for the first time in weeks. Brave. No one had ever called me that before. I kept going. I worked 3 jobs. Took community college classes in digital publishing. And when I finally earned my certification, I opened a small editing agency from my kitchen table. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't easy. But it was mine. And then, something happened. One rainy Saturday. I was reorganizing old boxes in the attic when I found the stack of envelopes I had once hidden. The lottery tickets? The birthday surprise. The unclaimed miracle. I stared at them for a long time. I thought about how, back then, I wanted to use that money to win back love. To prove something to people who didn't see me. But now, I wanted to use it to build a life where I never had to beg for love again. I drove to the state lottery office with shaking hands. When the clerk scanned the ticket, her eyes widened. "Ma'am," she said slowly. "Do you know what this is?" I nodded. "Congratulations," she said. "You've just claimed $10 million. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there, calm as ever, because I knew exactly what I was going to do. I bought a modest but beautiful house on the edge of the Blue Ridge Mountains. I hired a lawyer and quietly established a trust for my grandchildren, the kind of gift that would never be associated with manipulation or guilt. Then I did something bold. I bought the little cafe in town I used to walk past every morning. It was closing down. The owner was tired. I was just getting started. I renovated it. Named it Second Light. Because that's what this part of my life felt like. Not a second chance, but a second light. A glow I created for myself. Not borrowed from anyone else. And Emma, the woman who once whispered, "I'll be fine," while falling apart now, woke each morning to the scent of fresh coffee. The sound of laughter. And the kind of peace you can't fake. I had finally chosen me. And I wasn't going back. The cafe wasn't busy at first. On opening day, I brewed the first pot of coffee at 5 a.m. Hands trembling. Heart pounding. Wondering if anyone would even show up. Second Light sat on a quiet corner. Nothing flashy. Just hand-painted windows and a chalkboard sign that read, "Come in. You're safe here." I didn't want it to be a business. I wanted it to be a sanctuary for anyone who'd ever been forgotten. For anyone who'd ever felt invisible. By 8 a.m. The first customer walked in. A retired schoolteacher named Helen. She ordered an espresso and sat in the corner for hours. Just reading. She came back the next day. And the day after. Then came Marcus. A single dad. Then Priya. A college student with tired eyes and too many jobs. Soon, Second Light became more than a cafe. It became a haven. A soft landing for people trying to put their lives back together just like I had. I didn't tell people about the lottery. I didn't need to. What mattered was that every pie I baked, every flower I placed on a table, it was an act of rebuilding not just for the cafe, but for myself. And then one chilly October afternoon, the doorbell jingled. And a voice I hadn't heard in years said softly, "Hi, Mom." It was Brandon. He looked older, leaner, a little tired. He glanced around the cafe and whispered, "This is yours." I nodded. "Yes." He stared for a long time. "It's beautiful. It feels like you." I smiled. That meant more than he knew. It took a deep breath. "I came to say I'm sorry. For missing your birthday. For not seeing what you went through. For letting someone else call themselves mom without thinking about what that meant." I didn't cry. Instead, I reached across the counter, took his hand, and simply said, "Thank you for saying that." And just like that, quietly, Without ceremony, healing began. After Brandon's visit, something inside me softened. The years of silence and of pretending I didn't ache for my children just began to melt. Slowly. Not all at once, like winter finally giving way to spring. Megan came next. She walked into the cafe one rainy Sunday afternoon, wearing a yellow coat and holding a book I had given her when she was 10. Charlotte's Web. She sat at the counter, silent for a long while. Then, she said, "I used to read this when I missed you." I didn't know whether to smile or break down. Instead, I poured her tea and sat beside her. For an hour, we said nothing. Just sipped. Just shared the silence. Sometimes, that's all healing needs: space, warmth, and no pressure to explain the pain. In the weeks that followed, they kept coming back. Not out of obligation, but because something real was blooming again, something earned, not forced. One evening, Brandon helped me fix a broken light fixture in the back room. As he worked, he looked up and asked, "Why didn't you ever tell us about the money?" I smiled. "Because money doesn't fix what the heart doesn't understand. I didn't want to buy your love. I wanted to earn your respect." He was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Well, you have both." That night, I went home and sat on my porch, watching the stars peek through North Carolina's quiet sky. I thought about everything I had lost and everything I had gained. I wasn't rich in the way the world defines it. I didn't live in a mansion. I didn't wear designer clothes. But I had something far rarer. I had peace. I had purpose. I had a life that no one gave me one. I built with my own bruised hands. One quiet day at a time. And for the first time in decades, I whispered into the night not "I'll be fine," but something far more powerful: "I am whole." It was a crisp December morning when she walked in. She wore a faded blue scarf, glasses that slid down her nose, and a look I recognized instantly: tired, proud, and on the edge of breaking. She ordered a black coffee. No cream. No sugar. Her voice was soft, almost apologetics, like she'd grown used to not being heard. I watched her sit at the corner table, staring out the window as the snow began to fall. I didn't know her name, but I knew her story. Maybe not the details, but the rhythm of her silence, the weight of someone carrying too much for too long. That kind of pain has a shape. And once you've lived it, you recognize it in others. I brought her a small slice of cinnamon bread. On the house, she blinked. Surprised. Why? I just smiled and said, "You look like you need something sweet today." She didn't speak, but her eyes said, "Thank you." The next day, she came back. And the next, she always sat in the same chair, always wore the same blue scarf. One afternoon, I finally asked, "Do you want to talk?" She hesitated, then whispered, "I left my husband last month. 30 years. I thought I'd feel free, but I just feel empty." I nodded. Then quietly, I said, "It takes time, but that emptiness, that space, you're not broken. You're just starting." She looked up, her eyes filling entries. "You understand?" I smiled. "More than you know." Weeks passed, and she became part of the place, helping with dishes, wiping tables, talking softly with students who came in late to study. She never needed much. Just warmth. Just belonging. And one snowy evening, as she wrapped her scarf and waved goodbye, she said something I'll never forget. "You saved me, Emma." You reminded me I'm still here. I watched her disappear into the snow, and my heart swelled. Because in that moment, I realized something I hadn't seen until now. This cafe, this life, it was never about starting over for me. It was about creating a place where others could too. And that was worth more than any lottery ticket could ever give. Years later, people still ask me how I survived. I tell them, I didn't. I rebuilt. I rebuilt from silence. From betrayal? From the pieces of a woman I almost lost. Not with money, but with meaning. Not with revenge, but with purpose. Second Light still stands. The paint has faded, but the warmth hasn't. People come here not because it's perfect, but because it's real. Sometimes I sit by the window, sip my coffee, and watch someone walk in. Unsure. Lost, just like I once was. And when I smile at them, I'm not just greeting a stranger. I'm passing the torch, because somewhere along the way, I stopped chasing light and started becoming it.